True. Hi.
Hi, lady.
Hello. I'm Christine McDonald. Nice to meet you, Julia.
Nice to meet you guys.
Hi.
Hi.
So,
Very honored to have been selected. Love your earrings, Jacinta.
Oh, thank you.
no, it's a pleasure to have you here. We're really glad that you submitted and we get to talk to you now. So this is really awesome.
The first thing that we'd love is if you could tell us a bit about yourself, your name, your background, where you're from.
So my name is Julia Levitina. I'm a sculptor. I am originally from Odessa, Ukraine. I have been living in the States since I was 14 years old. We immigrated with my parents to New York. I moved to Philly to go to the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. I spent about 2 years there. Then I had the opportunity to study at a private academy that my then teacher and now colleague and friend Stuart Feldman founded, was Kevin Llewellyn. And then I've been here ever since, working and exhibiting, making sculpture.
That's awesome. I see that you are in your studio right now.
I am actually not in my studio. I wish this was my studio. This is probably the studio I'm most envious of all of my colleagues. My studio is substantially more of a mess, but I'm actually working with also someone who I met at the Academy, who was one of my first sculpture teachers at the Pennsylvania Academy, George Nista. So that is his wonderful studio. There's a large mold that we're working on.
Awesome.
Because my studio actually is in South Jersey. It is a lot more industrial, and George just has the look for his sculpture studio is perfect. And mine doesn't have as good of a reception as it turned out for Zoom. So the options were my house or George's studio. So kindly allowed me to talk.
Could you tell us what your typical art practice looks like, and maybe even talk about some of the pieces that you submitted in your application?
Yeah, so my studio is somewhat more industrial in nature because I do my own bronze work. So George does his own craft work as well, but his finished material is usually plaster or resin, where mine is bronze. So I have a whole metal finishing part of my studio, as well as wax casting and ceramic. So I'm actually going to be taking George's project from the mold to the waxes and onward. Hopefully it's going to be cast at Laurent bronze. Hopefully they'll open soon, but then it's going to come back to my studio anyway, where I'm going to be welding and doing metal finishing on it and stuff like that. So I guess my studio as well as my practice divide themselves into the creative side, which is working in clay, on armatures. I work figuratively. It's animals and figures. Sometimes I work in terracotta, but for the most part, I just make my own oil clay in big turkey roasters, cook it for 3 days. So I think we all have pretty high ceilings. We're fortunate enough. And we have a garage door at my studio. George just has these beautiful windows with beautiful light. We just pop the garage open for sometimes just have extra light. And I split my time between craft and art. And that helps me just to be a full-time working artist, because I'm able to work my own work. I'm able to also work for other people, which helps a lot. And yeah, I work in my studio pretty much. I work every day, but Sunday. So I'm there 6 days a week. I try to be disciplined about kind of splitting my day into my own personal work and then craft, which sometimes works out, sometimes does not. But that's kind of my goal, is to split the work up, because sometimes it's my own craft work, sometimes it's other people's craft work, but sometimes you get into a piece and you don't want to stop. So how that goes. And as far as what my work is about, I think in general it's about looking for extraordinary in the ordinary. I think that often we kind of pass by things because we're used to them, and we don't, or just we're in a rush and don't really have a chance to kind of stop and think about it and think about it in new ways. So I think that's one of the gifts that an artist has, is being able to look at something that we've seen 100,000 times, but just from a new kind of perspective, and then communicate that in one's art. So typically that's what my work, has been about. I always work from life. Even some of the kind of more like whimsical pieces, they still start out from, I love working with models. I always work with models. I draw from a live model at least once a week. I try to work from live models more than once a week if I can make it work. Sometimes actually we've gotten together at George's studio as well, and he has a lot of great models, a lot of great dancers. So we then steal models from him. I've gotten some really good models that way. Yeah, but if you had a question about a specific piece.
One of the pieces you applied with is called Don't Wake Juniper. Could you speak a little bit about that piece?
Yeah, so I know one of the questions was also like the dream project. I would love to see that horse. I'd love to carve it in marble. I'd love to carve it big in marble. I taught at the Florence Academy of Art a few the workshops, and there were like a few years in a row. And I think 2 years ago was the last one thus far. And I got to go to Pietrasanta in Carrara and see some of the marble carving studios and meet some of people who became kind of like colleagues and friends there. So I talked to them about that horse. But that horse is well, for one, I did a lot of life studies for that horse. I have friends in Connecticut who own carriage horses, and they became really, really good friends because of that project, because I ended up going up there to help a friend who was teaching a horse modeling workshop, and then became really good friends with the people who owned those draft horses. And I ended up spending just hours, just even, to get the turn of the neck, I'd be like holding on to the horse, an apple in the other hand, and making the horse turn its head while holding the body. It was very cool. The piece itself, it was one of those things. I threw it up as a very small maquette, and I just put the wings on, and I didn't want them to be big wings. I wanted them to be small wings. And I like that kind of oppositional quality, I guess. And people mistake it for the Pegasus, but it's not. So to me, in the end, and it's funny because sometimes I know exactly what the piece is going to be about, and then I just kind of like follow that development of a narrative. But sometimes the piece kind of opens itself to me, and this is definitely one of those pieces. There's also a song written by someone who I'm very influenced by musically, called Don't Wake Juniper. And so in the end, that piece ended up about appreciating moments. And people were like, well, is this a flying horse? How can it fly? Where's the aerodynamics with wings like that? But then I realized it doesn't need wings. It's in itself aerodynamic. It can fly just as an entity. And I realized that to me, that was like a cloud shaped like a horse rather than a horse. And it's a kind of cloud that can change into something else if it's disturbed. So if you wake her, she will be something different, maybe equally beautiful and exciting, but different. And that, I'm kind of into like quantum physics and things like that. So to me, that was like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, is that superposition of part of the matter that's a wave and the particle at the same time. And then when you disturb that superposition, it becomes one or the other. So I guess that was about kind of appreciating moments and being able to enjoy them without changing them into something else.
Amazing. How have you managed to stay creative during quarantine?
Well, I guess particularly the first couple of weeks were really challenging. I spent a lot, so I'm a singer-songwriter in addition to being a sculptor. So I spent a lot of time by myself, alone in my studio, but playing music out gives me a kind of a social life, which all of a sudden was gone, completely. And it's really hard because, as artists, right, we're kind of solitary to begin with. And I know there've been kind of like, little memes and whatnot saying, oh, all the introverts have been waiting for this, their entire life. And I was like, that's nice, because I've never experienced that level of isolation. And then things that I would enjoy doing in my spare time, like playing music, writing songs, some of the other things that I pursue, were suddenly gone. And all I was doing was frantically applying to anything that I could, kind of not knowing how I was going to make it work. And something I do want to say, Philadelphia sculptors, and I think I mentioned in my application, I wrote to Leslie, and you guys were the only ones who actually attended to exactly what was going on for an artist. You just got right to the matter of the thing. Everything about this grant was amazing. Just your sensitivity to the artist's situation, the timeliness of it, the kind of like no bullshit aspect, the appropriateness of questions to the application. And I thank you for it tremendously. Even like, I think I put it in the application, regardless of whether or not I got the grant. That was just really special. It really touched me. And you were the only ones that really came through in kind of a practical, immediate and appropriate way, for which I'm tremendously, it just felt nice to even be appreciated, because another thing was that I was applying for government assistance and grants and less collection, and and in the end, the local congressman was like, "Oh, art is not a sustainable industry." And I'm like, "You ask." So I wrote him a scathing letter about, it's like at least 20,000 years of being sustainable versus his office job that who knows how long that's going to last. But still, it was kind of hurtful, when your life's purpose is deemed unsustainable industry. And so all that said, it was really difficult to focus, but fortunately I had a bunch of metal work actually sitting that I was intending to get to. And I think just the loud tools. So like creatively, I wasn't very functional, to be perfectly honest. But just using the grinders, there's only one way to weld. I didn't need to think about it. And I was just grateful to be in my studio, because it's actually in South Jersey. So I was just like frantically trying to at least get the craft work that I needed to get done, because I was worried that they might close the state lines down at any time, and there was that curfew recommendation, stuff like that. So I was just like, I would wake up, check my phone, make sure the city didn't close the bridge, and I was like, as long as the bridge is open, take my dog. My essential reason to go out, go to the studio and get a metal grinding, metal finishing. And that was kind of like the first few weeks until like the reality set in, and I kind of made my peace with what my options were in general, and started relying more on myself than on any, outside source. And I was thrilled to get your grant. I was thrilled to get a call back from George saying, as soon as he feels safe going to the building, we could work on this thing, on this mold. And so that was a relief. And then I have a number of things in the works in my studio as well that are ongoing projects. Fortunately, I think I would have a hard time starting something from scratch right now, other than writing. So I've been writing a bunch. I've been writing blogs for my gallery. That was something else, actually. I read an article because I remember that Michelangelo was working while the bubonic plague was going on. And I was like, okay, well, that's someone that I look up to a lot. And I started researching that, and I'm a guest blogger for Standing Gallery, for my gallery in town. And since there wasn't a specific show to kind of blog about, I was like, okay, maybe I can tackle and see how Michelangelo kind of handled the pandemic, So I did, and it turns out that he did work through the bubonic plague as together with a whole bunch of artists. And then I kind of, as a result of this research, I learned that the plague actually spurred the Renaissance in some ways. And a lot of artists like Tintoretto, for example, fought back with their art. And they were actually kind of inspired to like sing the glory of life in light of what was going on. So I read about that, I wrote about that, and realized that history is actually full of optimistic messages, and we're not necessarily kind of going down, but in fact it might, or pandemics like that. And that one kind of kept coming and going. It wiped out this third of Europe's population, but it spurred a lot of socioeconomic changes that actually made it possible for artists like Michelangelo to just work in their studio, and families like Medici started patronizing the arts because I guess they realized life was short and you better enjoy it. So that was kind of, now I wrote that, I made myself feel better. I got, I think, just whatever resentment I had about the situation out of the way with my metal tools. And now I'm back to working towards what, I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but I have a show presumably in January of next year, 2021, at the Standing Gallery here in town. And I have a body of work that I'm developing towards it. I'm really excited about. So coincidentally, I'm working on a piece called Gathering right now. So that seems, just a positive kind of message to hold on to for myself and my creative studio work.
That's awesome. And you kind of already answered this next question with the Renaissance and Michelangelo, but in what way do you think that art and artists are beneficial during this time?
Oh my God. To me, it's just what I always say. It's part of my statement. It's my hashtag on Instagram. And that's that art is the highest form of hope. And I really, truly believe that in my heart. I think so a long time ago, I got this not very significant award from National Sculpture Society, but it was for a sculptor who uplifts the human spirit by way of his or her art. And to me, that is the point. That is why I'm making what I'm making. That is why I'm alive. And I truly believe that. And the amazing thing is that, so a couple of years ago, I sculpted and installed an over life-size St. Joseph on Georgetown University campus. So it's a saint, a pretty traditional, classically inspired piece of St. Joseph in robes holding baby Jesus in his arms. And the reason they commissioned it, interestingly enough, is because St. Joseph was their patron. They established him as their patron saint because he's said to have protected the campus from the Spanish flu of 1918. So St. Joseph has been there since, 2 years ago. And since the pandemic started, the students reformed this lantern society that was on campus back then. So they light the lantern now every night at St. Joseph's feet. And I found that I accidentally saw their post, like on one of the social media sites. And I was really moved because it's doing exactly what it was supposed to be doing. That piece was about compassion, and it's inspiring, and I can see it. This is totally, it's just they're talking about how this sculpture is providing some light to the community, is inspiring the community to kind of stick together. And it's a Jesuit school, so for them to stick together in prayer. So, and that was kind of the function, that was the point, and it is in fact doing its job, and that is to remind people of hope and compassion. And so I think that seeing that in action was incredibly moving to me, and I truly believe that that's what great art does, and that's what I aspire to producing, something that will speak across cultural, social, historical boundaries to something that's universal to all of us. And I think that is hope, and that is the belief in human spirit and the resilience of the human spirit, especially in light of adversity.
Yeah, no higher compliment than someone truly interacting with your artwork. And
it's incredibly moving when that happens, for sure. When it elicits a true emotion that's not, it's not been written up for a purpose, but it's like you stumble across it and you're like, wow, like that's when it resonates like that. It is very special.
So on a similar note, I mean, you talked about carving in marble, but is there another dream project that you're really hunting or interested in?
So yeah, I'd like to see that horse carved in marble. And then I also have a piece, it's a small piece. It's 2 wrestling rabbits. It's about this big, but it's been very popular with my collectors. And I would love to have that in bronze as a fountain for some kind of like a kid's part, so it was just jets of water and a little bit larger than life so kids can climb on it. I guess it's the sculpture of Alice in Wonderland in Central Park is one I really love. And I love because it interacts like that. It's very much alive. I think it's great to have work in museums and galleries, but it's very kind of sterile and it's apart and you look at it and, but here, when there's an interaction and it's living and it's alive, and that's also the same reason why I'd love to have that horse in the kind of a public space like that, where it can really, it can really live, can really interact, especially with kids, because their reactions are so raw. It's very endearing. So I would love to see the 2 wrestling hares, big and like a water fountain.
I hope we get to see that for sure. That would be awesome.
Yes, and spread the word. If anybody needs large rabbits,
those opportunities, we'll send them your way.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And our next question for you is if there is an artist that you're inspired or excited by right now that you'd like to share with us.
So my latest thing has actually been Mexican folk art. I think that is just so joyful. And actually when I started thinking about doing, so this piece, the Gathering piece, and I haven't shared any images of it yet because it's so raw, it's still in progress. But it's actually a bunch of animals stacked one on top of another. And I saw some of this is probably what prompted the thought, is one of my singer-songwriter friends shared some images of this city that she was in Mexico. And these dogs were some of the like souvenir objects, I guess, made by this family called the Ortega family. And I was like, this thing is so cool. Who made it? And I started researching it and eventually found these like dog and rooster towers, and then just like dogs standing on 4 legs, one on top of another, and there's a rooster on top. And that art is so like joyful. It's colorful, it's terracotta, so it's very warm. It's very like primitive in a way. So it's completely not how I work, but it appealed on this very visceral level. So I've been looking into a lot of kind of Mexican Mexican folk art. And I love folk art in general. And I think it's just, yeah, it's kind of whimsical and it's kind of joyful. And it's, I love it. It just makes me happy. So that's been my recent interest.
What book would you recommend to artists right now?
So since we spent a fair amount of time talking about Renaissance and Michelangelo, I would recommend The Agony and the Ecstasy by Irving Stone. He wrote a bunch of books about artists. I think that one is the best one. It's extraordinarily well researched. It's extremely entertaining. I read it for the first time when I was in Florence for the first time, and I was, I think, 19 or 20. And I reread it this last time I was in Florence after a lot of hesitation, because I was like, that book really influenced me a lot. And I didn't want to pick it up again now as a professional sculptor and be disappointed. But I did, and I was not disappointed. It's hilarious, it's entertaining, it's extraordinarily well researched. I think he paints a really cool picture of what Florence was like, or what Rome during the pandemic was like. I think a lot worse than what we're experiencing right now. It gives a little perspective. And Michelangelo was such a powerhouse. He's just a tremendous, tremendous output, artistic output, a really intense person, you know, somebody who looked beyond, so that we're still able to go, and his work, you know, just still brings you, just it captures the soul of what human kind of strife and triumph is all about. So I would, like I say, it's a really, like, it is not an academic read. It is a great historical novel. It's a good, like, beach read, pandemic read, any read. It's uplifting as well. I think anything uplifting is good right now.
Definitely read that book and enjoyed it.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
It only gets better. It's one of those books where you read again, you don't remember all the details. You know, the more you work as an artist, the more you recognize some of the things that you're dealing with, or at least I'm dealing with personally. And you're like, you know, Michelangelo at one point wasn't paid for like 2 years. He was just, you know, because the popes kept changing, and then if he wasn't like was the incoming pope, all of a sudden, like, there were no contracts, like you didn't get the pope to sign anything. So it's like he had a huge commission one day and nothing the next. You know, so it's just kind of like, well, you know, if Michelangelo could handle that kind of annoyances with his clients, you can.
You got it.
I can keep fighting for it.
Yeah. On that note, do you have any words of advice that you'd like to share with other artists, or any words that you've been given that you find inspiring that you'd like to share?
I think right now, especially when the creative juices are flowing, right? It's easy. It's like the sky opens up and it drops it to your lap, and you just go like, thank you, and you keep on working. I think there's so much distraction right now, at least for me. And I don't know, I conceptually understand that there's some people who are kind of spurred by the situation. It's not me. I find it very distracting. I find the news very distracting, but I have to keep up with them right now. Like, you know, when things are kind of relatively okay, I'm able to just kind of shut it out. But right now I'm trying, like, my parents are both in New York City. My dad is working. So that's something that's like constant anxiety. So I feel I have to keep up with the news so I can tell them kind of the best way to continue staying safe while also not going crazy, you know, and stuff. So I guess right now, probably the most useful words of advice is something that Rodin said in French, which was toujours travailler, which means just always work, you know, so no matter what. And it was in the concept, kind of inspiration comes and goes, but you're just gonna keep plugging along no matter what. And eventually you just kind of find that momentum again. So that's what I keep on reminding myself of. I think true artists are gonna work no matter what. I think there could be like, you know, the world was like coming apart and I'm gonna be like, I gotta finish that bronze real quick. But I think that, I think just to continue working, and I think that it's important to continue believing that it does matter. Like it was real kind of a little bit of a heartbreak, because you kind of know that artists are a bit of an underdog, and sculptors in particular, you know, across the arts. But then to actually like have it in writing, like, it's not sustainable. And I was like, okay, that hurts. But I think that it's not the case. I think that art has made a difference through the best of times and the worst of times. And I think to continue producing and continue trying to get at the truth of what we're trying to say, so that we're communicating some kind of an insight that allows people to see the world a little bit differently, maybe in a way that is a little bit more beautiful and a little bit more hopeful, is our job. And just like everybody in this time that's going to continue for a while, everybody is going to sacrifice. And I think we are going to as well, and everybody's going to do their job. And I think that's part of it is contributing to a better future. Maybe there's going to be another renaissance. Who knows?
That would be really interesting, actually. I would love to see what that means right now. It would be
Maybe we'll emerge, with more insightful, more compassionate, and more aware of things that we appreciate that are now not as available or unavailable.
If you could live with any piece of work made by an artist, what would you select?
Michelangelo's Pietà.
Yeah? Okay.
Right out of Florence. Yeah, I love that piece. It's beautiful and moving. But in truth, I actually am lucky enough to live with a lot of art by my colleagues, whose work I admire a lot. And I have traded over the years, and I'm accumulating quite a collection that not only am I proud of and proud of the work, but also it is tremendously uplifting and satisfying to be able to look at the arts that you admire. I really think, there's just a functional, mental, something that it does to expand your mind, to calm your mind. There have been studies done of how looking at art changes the way your brain is functioning for the better. So I'm lucky enough to have work of, a lot of people who I admire, Philly artists that I've exhibited with, international artists that I've exhibited with. So I'm very lucky in that way. I would love to have the Pietà, but I'm quite happy with the collection that I do have at home, and that I'm fortunate to look at every day and be moved by and appreciative of every day.
It's beautiful. Julia, thank you so much for taking this time to answer these questions and talk with us. And we're so happy that we could facilitate this and be a part of that grant for you.
Thank you guys so much. Like I said, I'm tremendously grateful, tremendously moved. It felt so important to actually be like caricature, it's, especially like in light of the situation. So I'm beyond words. I'm grateful, and it was a really amazing thing. That was really moving. It was both a lifesaver because I was like, here I am, So in the practical way, it was tremendous for me. But also, I think something that I can't even put a price on is just how encouraging it felt to feel that somebody knew and somebody understood exactly and acted and supplied this. So you guys made like I said, just there's no words for the difference you made that goes beyond the financial. Because it's, it just gives you that extra incentive to be like, okay, yes, what I'm doing does matter, even if there's this feeling that does not, it actually does. And it makes it gives a tremendous burst of just mental energy to continue creating.
Really, truly been our pleasure to read and listen to everything that the artists we've already interviewed have said, and to have you as an addition to this voice. It's been really inspiring as well. So just, it goes without saying that it's been such an honor to chat with you and to hear you talk about your work and what art means to you. So thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.